Hello, and welcome to video 2 in a brief series of videos on effective team communication. Today we're going to talk about when and why communication breaks down. We remember from video 1 this diagram that describes or illustrates how we react to things, or all of the factors that go into how we react to things. So because there are so many factors that we aren't even aware of because they're inside our own heads, we can see how this experience can lead to communication breakdown because people are having different feelings as a result of the different stories that they create, and assume that other people are having the same interpretations or same stories about the shared events. Now, this particularly gets sticky under conditions of stress. So, what happens when we're stressed or feeling under the gun? Well, this is where this metaphor or tool can be handy. We call it the line. And notice that below the line, we are driven by fear. And so we have all these different characteristics that come to the surface when we're fearful or stressed. Notice that above the line, we're relaxed, and so therefore we can have all these positive kinds of characteristics. So this is a useful tool for simply asking ourselves, where am I at this current moment? Am I below the line or above the line? And it makes us aware of where we are so that if we're below the line, we maybe can decide to take a few deep breaths and pull ourselves up above the line for at least a few minutes. Now, this is a useful tool for examining ourselves, but we don't want to use it to make reference to other people. So we don't want to say things like, John, it sounds like you're below the line, because if John, whether or not John was below the line before, he's probably going to be below the line once we say that, right? He's going to feel defensive. So again, this is useful for examining ourselves, but not for using on other people. Now, the human brain is also wired in a certain way that we have several particular forms of bias in how we think. And when I say bias, they're just ways that we unconsciously process information and don't even recognize it because it's part of our cognitive software. And there's a few of these biases that can cause some communication breakdown. The first one we call the fundamental attribution error. And that is when someone else does something negative, we tend to attribute it to their character. Whereas when we do something negative, we're more likely to attribute the cause to an external reason, that is, the circumstances. So notice that when somebody's late, we tend to assume that they're irresponsible, right? That's part of their character. But when we're late, we know that it's not because we're irresponsible, it's because of something that happened along the way that caused us to be late. It was out of our control. So the fundamental attribution error leads us to make these negative judgments about other people's character or personality that can, of course, cause all kinds of conflicts and communication problems. We also have the curse of knowledge, and that is once we know something or how to do something, we overestimate the extent to which others know it or can do it. So when we know how to do something, we say, oh, it's easy, or we know something as knowledge, we say it's common knowledge, it's common sense. So we can see how this leads to communication breakdown because we become frustrated when other people don't know how to do something that we assume they should know how to do, or they don't have some factual information that we just take for granted. Conversely, people might get frustrated with us when we don't have that knowledge or that experience, and they make the assumption based on the curse of knowledge that we should know what we're doing or we should know, this factual information. We also have the work discrepancy bias. Now, because we are aware of all the work we do, but we can never know every bit of work somebody else does, it seems to us as though we work more. So just naturally, it's going to feel like I work more or work harder than people around me. And those other people feel the same way because of this work discrepancy bias. And that gets us into trouble because we humans are finally attuned to the sense of fairness. And if it feels unfair, we're going to be very upset, and that's going to come out in all kinds of problems. And so we're going to have communication issues if we feel like it's unfair, like we work harder than other people do. But please recognize that the work discrepancy bias is at play for all of us. And so it's common for multiple people in the same situation or the same work environment to feel like they work harder or work more than everybody else around them. Also, communication can break down when there's a sense of interpersonal drama. And those are the cases where we want to be aware of the drama triangle. And the drama triangle is this illustration of three different roles. Notice that we have a victim and a villain. Now, the victim feels like they've been persecuted in some way by the villain. Now, the villain could be a person, could be a group of people, could be an organization, could be society as a whole, but they feel like they're being victimized or punished in some way or treated unfairly, being made to do things they don't want to do, whatever. So they're the victim. Now, it only becomes a triangle if the victim goes to another person and tries to recruit them to be the hero or the rescuer and get that person to do the work of trying to resolve the problem. So we can see that as outsiders that the victim should probably go to the villain and try to resolve whatever issues they have. But if they instead go to another person and complain or cry or get their sympathy, then that other person might become the hero or the rescuer and try to intervene. And probably it's not going to go well. It's not going to resolve itself. And so it just becomes a perpetual sort of cycle of continued drama, and people might even shift around and take on different roles, going from the villain to the victim to the hero and the rescuer and so forth. So whenever we sense that this is going on, we need to be careful of what roles people are playing and whether they're falling into the drama triangle and making things worse rather than trying to figure out how to resolve the conflict, or the feeling of being a victim, and directly do that with the villain. And of course, with each of these roles, we probably get some psychological payoff for each of them. And so when we find ourselves playing one of the three roles, it's useful to ask, what am I getting out of this? Why am I finding myself playing this role? Do I tend to play one of these three roles more than I do the others? So in conclusion, communication frequently breaks down because our stories include all kinds of assumptions, and everybody else's stories includes their own assumptions. Stress drives us below the line where we get defensive. Our brains are wired with particular biases that leave us feeling frustrated with others. We saw how, it distorts our thinking about other people compared to ourselves. And then we can fall into the drama triangle, which just perpetuates the drama and the conflict rather than resulting in resolution. So that was it for video 2. In video 3, we're going to tackle resolving conflict and having difficult conversations.